Movement is a crucial part of Rainbow Six Siege. Someone who knows how to properly move compared to someone who doesn't can completely determine your skill level and your rank. So how do you properly move within Rainbow Six Siege? Well, let's talk about it. To start things off, to be able to talk about movement, I have to talk about positioning as well, because having good positioning is a part of having good movement. You must understand that your positioning is everything, especially within the current meta we're in. People within this meta are playing a lot more aggressive and are swinging corners in different lines of sight faster than ever. In fact, you'll even hear the term swing or be swung a lot because it's a common thing that will happen to you in every game you play. If you're not swinging an enemy to get the kill, then they most likely will swing you instead and kill you. But why is swinging someone so effective? Well, it's because of server delay and ping. When you swing a corner and an enemy is holding a common angle next to it, you'll see the enemy faster than they see you, allowing you to shoot faster and get the kill. Watch any kill cam that you've been swung in and you'll see for yourself. The enemy will see you faster than you saw them, and that's why you died. That brings me to my first tip, which is don't hold common angles that an enemy would expect someone to be holding. Instead, try holding an off angle that the enemies won't expect. By positioning yourself in a smart spot, it will give you the advantage in the gunfight because when the enemy comes to swing the corner, they won't expect you to be holding an off angle that no one usually holds. For example, let's say you're playing on the basement bomb site on Oregon and the enemy team is doing a push down white stairs. Well, most people would hold an angle behind a pillar. However, this is such a common angle that it gets pre-fired a lot. So instead, hold an off angle somewhere else that the enemy wouldn't expect. That way, when someone comes swinging from white stairs, they won't have enough time to notice where you are because you'll be shooting at them. Additionally, once you've gotten quick peeking down, you have to understand what side you're better at quick peeking from. So let's say you're better at quick peeking from your left, then try holding more angles to the left compared to the right. While it's something small, it'll help to ensure that you win more gunfights because you're putting the odds more in your favor. Also, you have to understand when to peek because sometimes you could be too exposed to different angles around you, which could get you killed. You have to think about every possible angle you're exposing yourself to before you peek that doorway or that corner, then adjust yourself from there. The same goes for holding too long of angles as well. Think to yourself before you hold an angle. Is this an angle that's winnable if an enemy swings and sees me? Remember, attackers have higher magnification scopes than a defender. So as a defender, you don't want to hold too long of an angle because the attacker will most likely see you first. Okay, so now that I've talked about positioning and how to have better positioning and smarter positioning, it's time to talk about movement itself. Starting with going prone, you only want to do it when it's your last option. What I mean by that is, let's say you're holding the garage on a clubhouse and the enemies kill your teammate who's holding it with you, and then they start pushing in. At this point, you're running out of options quickly as you have no utility left and the enemies are pushing from different angles. If you stay standing up, you'll get killed. If you crouch, you'll get killed. So your only option is to prone. That way the enemies will think you've given up all control of garage and will push up the stairs just to get gunned down by you holding an off angle while proned. In that example, you only prone because you're in a bad position and you have to hide. That's really the only time you should be proning. If you found yourself in a bad position and you literally have no other option, then prone. But other than that, you shouldn't prone at all. Especially if you're in a 1v1. The reason being is because within a 1v1, sound is the most important thing. Whatever sound you hear, you know it's coming from the enemy because all your teammates are dead, so it can't be them. It can't be the other enemies either because they are dead as well. That leaves the one person who's left, which is the guy you're in a 1v1 with. This information is important because proning is one of the loudest things you could do. You instantly know when someone is proning from the sound it makes. That means if you prone during a 1v1, then the enemy will hear you do it, then immediately swing you and kill you. So avoid doing it at all costs. Moving on to when you should sprint. The only time you should be sprinting is when you know an area is 100% clear. So let's say you've droned an area and you know that a certain room is completely clear of any enemies. You could sprint through there. However, once you've gotten to an unknown area that you haven't droned and have no information on, you shouldn't be sprinting at all. Another good example is, let's say you're roaming and you need to get back to site. You could sprint through areas you know that nobody will be in. However, once you're close to site, you should stop sprinting and start checking common angles in places where someone would be watching for a flank. Additionally, you have to know when you should and shouldn't crouch. You definitely shouldn't be crouch walking around the map to be quote unquote sneakier. This is a bad habit that a lot of new players have. So if you're new to the game and find yourself constantly crouch walking, you need to stop it. Crouch walking will just make you an easy target. People can still hear you when you're crouch walking, so if you're trying to be quiet, just walk instead. Really, the only time you should be crouching is when you want to re-peek an angle at a different height. For example, let's say you peek an angle and the enemy 100% saw you peek. They will be expecting you to re-peek that angle at head height, so they'll most likely just pre-fire the angle at head height and kill you. So instead, you could crouch and re-peek at a different height. That way it catches the enemy off guard and then you'll get the kill. Finally, there's walking. Not to confuse you with regular walking, I'm talking about slow walking. Times when you'd be using this is when you need to be very quiet. For example, let's say you're about to go up a staircase that is right next to the bomb site. If you want to be as quiet as possible without anyone knowing you're there, then you would slow walk. Another good example is when you're flanking someone and you're starting to get close to where they are. You're going to want to slow walk because you don't want to be heard. However, you definitely don't want to be slow walking when you know an area is clear. At that point, it's just useless because there's no enemies to hear you anyways. Just remember, slow walking is your quietest option. So if you're someone who crouch walks a lot, stop doing that and instead try slow walking. In conclusion, to have good movement in Rainbow Six Siege, you also need to have good positioning. You want to always have smart positioning by doing things like not holding common angles or taking into consideration how many different angles you could die from. When it comes to your actual movement, you need to know when and when not to do certain kinds of movement, like when to crouch, sprint, prone, and even walk. While something like peeking or even sprinting can seem so simple, when you really break it down, there's a lot to learn. So make sure to think about your positioning and your movement and take all things into consideration before you do something. It could make the difference between you living and you dying. That's it for me though. What are some tips you have on movement in Rainbow Six Siege? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like. And if you want more content like this, then subscribe. Have a great day, everyone.